Chelsea Mitchell, the fastest girl in track across the state of Connecticut, who for all 4 years lost over 20 races to biological males because of policy and honestly just no common sense across the state. And she lost out on state championships and more, as did other female competitors. And Christiana Keifer joins us. She is the senior counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom. She's also representing Chelsea in this matter as they sue the state of Connecticut. Christiana, thank you for the time and hope things are well.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Absolutely. I know there was a hearing on Tuesday after there was a 3-judge panel of the Second Circuit that ruled against this in December. What came of the hearing on Tuesday, and where are we now in your efforts?
Yeah, so if you don't mind me backing up just a little bit, we filed this lawsuit in February of 2020, and the trial judge unfortunately sat on it for about 14 months before he dismissed the girls' case entirely, didn't even give them a hearing. So we appealed that to the Second Circuit, and the Second Circuit 3-judge panel, as you mentioned last fall, affirmed the denial and said, the girls are graduated, there's nothing we want to do here. But the girls' athletic records matter. They have been wronged. They've been injured by this competition against male athletes. And much to our surprise, the entire Second Circuit Court of Appeals decided to rehear the case. And that happened on Tuesday. And we thought things went very well. We argued in front of a 15-judge panel. They asked hard questions of both sides, but I was happy to be us and not to be the other side, which is usually how you want things to go in court. So we're optimistic. We made the case that the girls have been injured. They deserve the opportunity to make their full case under Title IX, which hasn't happened yet. And we are optimistic that the court will allow the case to move forward.
And Chelsea has filed a complaint for Title IX her junior year of high school, I believe, but she did this anonymously because she did not want her name out there. She didn't want to affect her college recruitment. Is that right?
That's exactly right. I mean, junior year of high school is a really important time in college recruitment. She was nervous. I mean, keep in mind, the 4 female athletes we represent in the state of Connecticut were among the very first to speak out in the entire country on this issue. So we're talking 15, 16-year-old girls standing up and saying, this is scary. We don't want this to impact our future college recruitment, but this is wrong, what's happening to us, forcing us to lose to male athletes. So Chelsea did initially start out anonymously, but then as time went on, she said, I just can't stand for people to think that I'm okay with this, that I'm okay with losing to male athletes myself and watching that happen to other young women as well. So she decided to go public and has just been an incredible asset with her story all along the way.
For those out there like us that want to see common sense legislation with this across the country, with every state, is your case a possible precedent setter moving forward if it goes the direction you want it to go in?
Yes, I think it absolutely could be. So if the Second Circuit gives us a way forward and allows us to make our full case under Title IX, this really could be a precedent-setting case that would establish, look, we have men's and women's teams for a reason. Title IX was enacted nearly 50 years ago to ensure that girls have equal access and equal opportunities, not just in education, but in sports. And in order for that to be possible, we have to protect the integrity of the female category. So I do think this could have major ramifications across the country if we're allowed to move forward.
Christiana, what happens if you're not allowed to move forward with this?
Well, it'll be deeply disappointing because this is the first federal lawsuit of its kind to be filed to protect women's sports. And really, it would be a slap in the face to female athletes who deserve to have that fair and level competition. But it's not the end of the road. It's really exciting to see more than 22 states have now passed laws to protect the integrity of women's sports. So if not this case, another one we expect fully will reach the Supreme Court to be decided.
What does Connecticut point to as why they're not one of the 22 to have policy that don't allow this, that would allow Chelsea to win state titles and not lose to a male?
Well, they point to bad science and a bad legal advice, in essence. They point to withdrawn guidance from the U.S. Department of Education under the Obama administration that was subsequently revoked. That's, in essence, what they rely on for their really radical policy that allows males to just self-identify into the female category. To underscore that, one of the male athletes that Chelsea Mitchell competed against actually competed in the boys category for 3 seasons before turning around right after the indoor season, 3 weeks later, started to train with and compete against the female athletes. That's allowed under Connecticut's radical gender identity policy.
Well, you mentioned bad science also. What bad science are they citing?
Well, they seem to think that simply identifying as a male identifying as a female makes you a female. And that simply is anti-science. No amount of self-identification is going to turn a male body into a female one. And in fact, there's plenty of science that indicates that males have an average of a 10 to 50% performance advantage over female athletes. That means that if they're lining up at the starting blocks, the male athlete generally is almost always going to win. And in fact, if we don't have separate male and female categories and separate teams, then I think we could really see a future where women were no longer on the podium, no longer earning those championship titles and those potential scholarship opportunities.
And this all happened for her, and I'm sure others, at the state level. So she's the fastest girl in high school. She set school records her freshman year. How dominant were these races for the transgender athletes at the state level compared to the fastest girl in the state?
Well, over the course of 3 years in the state of Connecticut, these 2 male athletes completely reshaped girls' high school track. Together, they won 15 women's state championship titles that the prior years had been held by 9 different girls. These males completely dominated. They also set 17 new individual meet records that some of my clients say they don't have any expectation of ever being able to break. And we calculated that more than 85 times they denied girls the opportunity to advance from a lower level of competition to the next level, which really can impact a girl's opportunities for recruitment, for college scouting opportunities, and the like. So again, they really reshaped Connecticut's high school track by just 2 male athletes being in the female category.
And there are 3 other women that have joined Chelsea with this. Are you representing all 4? And could there be others that could join in this moving forward?
Yes, Alliance Defending Freedom has the privilege of representing all 4 female athletes in the state of Connecticut who just chose to stand up and file a federal lawsuit. But we also represent female athletes across the country in other litigation as well. Athletes in the state of West Virginia and Idaho, Florida, and the list goes on, because what's happening in Connecticut is not an isolated incident. We're seeing increasing instances across the country in all types of sports, in all levels of sports, where males are deciding to identify as female and compete in the female category.
You mentioned blowback, from colleges, the fear of doing this junior year and then something happening with college recruitment. We've had Riley Gaines on this show. She's gotten blowback for her stance on this. Specifically with Chelsea, has she seen some negative attention from colleges throughout this? Has there been some issues with that?
I don't know about colleges. She certainly has received blowback on social media from individuals who disagree with her position, but she would tell you that she's received overwhelming support from the people in her community, from other female athletes, from coaches, from school administrators who will quietly support her. So I think it's important to recognize that the vast majority of the American public, statistics show, recognize that this is fundamentally unfair to force female athletes to lose to males in their sport. It's just time to start seeing more and more people stand up and speak out about it.
And just to clarify, is she a senior now in college? Is that right?
She's going into her senior year, yes.
Are you able to point in Connecticut right now and at the high school level of transgender athletes winning state titles right now?
So what I can tell you is there are reports of several male athletes currently competing in the state of Connecticut under this gender identity policy. I haven't personally been able to verify that information, but yes, and it makes sense, right? If you can simply self-identify into the female category and begin to go from a mid-level or mediocre male athlete to a champion, why not?
And I only ask that because if the previous panel, if they're going to point to the fact that, well, she's already graduated and, whatever, that would be important if you can say it's still ongoing and you can point to specific instances of this.
There's absolutely ongoing harm in the state of Connecticut. Recently, within just the last few weeks, we saw a couple of male athletes qualify for a state championship in the girls' track category in California. Certainly, many Americans are familiar with Leah Thomas and dominating NCAA swimming. So the list really goes on and on of the female athletes who are being negatively impacted by these gender identity policies, and they need to be fixed.
We don't really get a lot of argument on the other side of this when we bring up this issue. I think most people, like you said, in America are on the side of common sense and fairness when it comes to this. But one argument on the other side will always be, well, it's not happening that much. Why are you making a big deal out of it? It barely happens. We're talking about two biological males in the state of Connecticut. It's not really that big of a deal. What would you tell someone who says that?
Well, it certainly is a big deal to the young woman who's pushed off the podium, who is bumped down in the rankings by even one male athlete. One girl who is displaced from her own sport that has been rightfully set aside for her is one too many. And unfortunately, this is not an isolated incident. Again, we're seeing this in increasing numbers across the country at multiple levels of sport and different levels of schooling as well. So it is becoming a more and more urgent national issue, and it does need a national solution.
Christiana Keifer has been our guest. Just finally, quickly, when do we hope to hear something based on Tuesday's hearing?
Well, we could be looking at weeks or months before the court decision comes down. But the good news is, even the ACLU agreed with the vast majority of our arguments that the case should move forward. And so we are ultimately optimistic that we will win and be able to make our full case under Title IX.
Hey, thank you for the visit today. I'm sure we'll be revisiting down the road when we hear the results of Tuesday's hearing. And we're certainly on the side of the Alliance Defending Freedom here.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate
Christiana
it.
Keifer, representing Chelsea Mitchell and others.